So this is Louis, and I'll start this commentary by saying that I would appreciate if you wouldn't mind stopping over at my affiliates, the first being PlayAsia, the second being JList, and if you don't want to visit my affiliates, subscribe on Subscribestar to give me a monthly donation or just a one-time donation. All the links can be found in the description. I'm going to try to make this a short commentary because I recorded a commentary the other day that I thought was going to be short, and it turned out to be an hour long because of my rambling. And I just sat there at the end of it. I was like, okay, it's time to edit this. And I looked at the time amount for the full clip, and it was an hour long. And it really inspired that sort of like Mort Goldman, that character from Family Guy, just like, oh no, oh, like what am I doing to myself? So yeah, unfortunately with that, it's going to take me a while to actually edit that down. I'm going to really try to get it done, but my God, I kill myself, and I'm killing this channel with being long man bad and how long it takes to edit down my own content. But tangent aside, I wanted to talk about this article, but not really this article, but this article. One sentence really in it. I don't really want to talk about this stupid CBS show called The Good Fights, because it's like woke bullshit progressive propaganda on like a whole new level, but it's so fucking stupid and disingenuous in its own right that they can't even commit to their own bit in being like communist propaganda, because the immediate assumption to any outside observer is that this show is creating a false dichotomy in its storyline between there being the dichotomy of communists and Nazis. And basically, the show is taking the perspective that the moral actors are the communists. That's how you'd view it if you don't actually look into it more like I did. And they can't even commit to that kind of absurdity. They include people within the show that are conservatives or Republicans, at least, that are not Nazis and that are basically opposed to the Nazis. And so with that, it's a kind of false nuance to the show, even though still, if you just listen to the rhetoric of the show, and especially if you look at the online synopsis of each episode, this is clearly far left propaganda. This has to be the most woke content that I've ever seen, period. And for that, it's cringy, lazy, and if I wasn't afraid of copyright strikes, I would review it just to laugh at it, because there's no way this kind of show is not terrible. TV shows like this are always just shit. But the thing is, with copyright, there's no real winning here, and so I don't really see the incentive in bothering, and that's why I'm not bothering to talk about this shit outside of what I already have in this instance. What I want to talk about is Red Dead Redemption 2. I want to talk about this article. I want to talk about American Krogan's video. I want to talk about this tweet from American Krogan asking me to comment more on Red Dead Redemption 2 and what he didn't have time to get to. I want to be a little bit more accurate than I was in my response to his video last time, because I think I came across as too critical when I didn't mean to be. And so in this instance where there's a lot to talk about with this particular game, I think this article about the CBS show and this line from Bill from One Angry Gamer, he actually has a very good line here. Let me find that in the article and I'll read it to you. As mentioned in the article about Red Dead Redemption 2's SJW agenda, the Overton window in today's society is chiefly liberal. I think that's a misnomer, but it's even acknowledged in the quote above from the character in the show: anyone who doesn't align with their views with the intersectional Inquisition's hegemony is either cast out, turned into a pariah, or targeted with doxing, harassment, or violence. Exactly. Exactly. Well said, Bill from One Angry Gamer. This is exactly the issue. And this is going to American Krogan's video, and with Red Dead Redemption 2, this is the exact problem with Rockstar as a developer, and through them, the entire goddamn video game industry. Because a major portion of what is happening in media is simply this. The Overton window of what is accepted to believe politically is being dragged further and further to the left until the point where you have what is in essence communist propaganda, violent propaganda, like advocating political violence as moral and justified, as the go-to thing you should do. That is on mainstream television at this point. I can't go on cable television and say the word nigger or say the word fuck without getting censored. But if I wanted to go on mainstream television and advocate a race war, if I was black, if I was white, that would probably be censored. But if I am black, I can advocate political violence. I can advocate terrorism. I can advocate violence in such a way that it would lead to a civil war. I can advocate that on a show, and that is completely in the clear. This is not just propaganda. This is propaganda advocating violence. The thing is, as someone who is an actual free speech absolutist, an actual free expression absolutist, I think that all censorship, whether private or public, should be abolished. I think everything should be allowed, and that we shouldn't have any censorship of any kind, in any form, from any place, in any institution. I don't believe in any of it. And that includes that in regards to this shitty, cringy show. Because the fact is that it's so ridiculous, so absurd, and so cringy, there's no need to censor it. The problem is that we have censors with discretion, and they're allowed to censor me, censor you, censor all of us. But if we were to, paint our skin black, put on some blackface, and advocate a race war, we can get right past the censors because we are the right shade of color. The problem with censorship, and the problem with any kind of board of censors or institutions that censor material, is that they ultimately have the discretion of what they enforce and what they just allow. They have that right. They have that authority. And there's nothing that you and I can do about that. And so if you actually believe in principle that everything should be allowed and that censorship is wrong, then you have to say that these censorship boards and these censors should be removed. If you believe that you're an alt-centrist, you've opened your third eye and you think that censorship is still somehow justifiable, well, you're going to have to eat shit and have your face stuck in shit, because what you're calling for equal enforcement, fair enforcement, is impossible. Has never been done, it will never be done. You are advocating for a standard, for a practice that will never be enforced fairly, ever. It will always be up to the discretion of the individual censor, what they allow, what they block. They decide that, not you. And no matter what laws you put in place, no matter what rules and standards they set themselves or you force upon them, they will always have the discretion. They will always have the ability to just decide for themselves what is blocked and what is allowed. Why? They have that authority. The only thing you can do, if you want to be philosophically liberal and to be consistent and principled on the matter, is to advocate the abolition of all censorship boards, all censorship institutions, and censors just generally. They should all be gone. Anyways, my self-righteous rant aside, getting back to the actual topic at hand here, this is the thing that I think American Krogan missed, and I will tweet this at him on Twitter. More so than the small details that I would include about, what's her face? I don't even remember the fucking character's name. That just goes to show you how much I give a shit. Mary Sue's character does not fit in the game. She is ultimately someone that, unlike everyone else, just gets shot in the end. Everyone else either meets a tragic end, is on the run, or, with John, manages to have a couple good years until the Pinkertons catch up with him. Everyone else meets with a tragic end. The only exception is Mary Sue. Mary Sue is just a shoehorned-in character that's so out of place that the game, in essence, in the narrative of the game, has no idea what to do with her. Everyone else seems to have a place and has a story and has an arc. She's the only one that, as Krogan said, just devolves into a fucking psychopath, but is somehow propped up by the game as a legitimate and moral character, when out of everyone else who, even though they show themselves to be criminal or degenerate or what have you, she's the only one that the game props up, and it doesn't really make sense. Once again, even within the inner narrative of the game, she just doesn't fit. There's nothing about her that interweaves her within the gang or within the story of John or in the story of Arthur. She's just the odd woman out. She doesn't make any sense. And in my view, the only reason why she's in the game is for the sake of the Overton window being dragged to the left and Rockstar's studio believing internally that they must meet the demands of the progressives. Whether that's within the studio, and I've been told that there are, from an inside source that has now quit the studio, I've been told there are progressives in the studio advocating for this kind of shit. But even if they're not there, the only explanation that I can then find is that even though the progressives might not be within the company itself, they're still pandering to those people, despite the fact that they're not receiving internal pressure for these kind of things. Because like I said, the character, more so than even Krogan laid out, and I think he made a good case, she is nothing more than a Mary Sue character, and she is out of place in the story. She serves no purpose other than to virtue signal and try to appease progressive ire, when, in fact, they're not the ones playing these games, and et cetera, go down the line for all the things that I've been saying for the past 5 years that no one cares about and no one listens to. However, I think it's worth saying, if Krogan is going to do a second video talking about this topic, I think it's imperative on him to talk about this issue of, in fiction, it is seemingly, from their perspective as developers, it is incumbent on them to include this kind of garbage, even if it doesn't fit. Even if it's like a puzzle piece they have to fucking bash in. They're still including this content despite the fact that there is no demand for it. And in fact, there is an audience of gamers, myself included, that despise the inclusion of this kind of content. I've been a gamer my entire life. Going all the way back to early childhood, I've been a gamer. And a long-standing fan of Rockstar as a studio, going all the way back to GTA. And some people tried to fucking get me on GTA London, blow me. I beat GTA London back when I was still a kid. So nice try with that. When I talked about Dan and Sam Houser making a game based in the UK, I'm talking right now. You're attempting to do some sort of sleight of hand deflection against my own argument, but in fact, my entire point was they are so bogged down by their own inability to get out of fucking Brooklyn that they are incapable of actually detailing an accurate satirization or a really precise and scathing criticism of their own home country. They are incapable of doing that. Not because they don't have the fucking talent. They absolutely have that in spades, more so than practically any studio in the business. It's the fact that ideologically, they are bound, their hands are chained to the ground in having to be woke, having to produce this garbage and force it into their games, regardless of how ham-fisted it is, how terrible it is, and how much it drags the quality of the game down. They feel the need to do it. Mary Sue in this game is an absolutely abysmal character, and not because I hate her, but because I find her to be an unnecessary addition for the sake of nothing more than appeasing an ideological group. Even in the case of if she was a good character, I would admit it even if I didn't like her inclusion, but the fact is, as always, with these kind of characters, they're never good. They're never well written. They always feel forced. And it is simply because the people responsible for this content are not putting in any more effort than they need to. This is the bare minimum. This is minimal viability content. This is content that is simply being included for the sake of getting the backpats from journos and escaping the ire of activists. And so when they check that box, that is as much effort that is required of them to put into that content, and that's all they do. As I've said many times in the past, it's not about making good content, it's about making the right content. And once they check the box, that's it. They move on to whatever else. And if you look at Mary Sue's missions, especially the one like when Arthur goes up into the balloon with that pilot, let's say, and he's an amusing character, and Arthur, as always in the game, is charming and it's a ridiculous scenario, but he goes along with it anyways, and it's humorous and fun up until, not to spoil it, but the pilot gets shot, and I found that to be just a tragedy, like so many other deaths in the game of characters. I didn't mind them, existing in the game, even though he's a standalone character. The thing that didn't make sense in that storyline was just Mary Sue. What is she doing? Why is she present? Why is she getting the pilot shot? What is the point of any of this? What is this other than just another edition of the game trying to justify this character's existence and just forcing me to despise her even more? Because of her actions, because of Arthur having to save her life, the pilot dies, and, what comes of it? What is the addition in this game outside of, another chase scene involving a hot air balloon where a likable character gets killed? I don't mind, in the narrative, characters that I like being killed off, but out of everyone in the game that has a tragic end, or is on the run, or is betrayed, or gets killed, Mary Sue is the one that walks away. And it's because she has progressive armor, progressive plot armor, all over her. They can't kill her off. They couldn't kill her off. Not because she's in, the original Red Dead. As far as I'm aware, she's not in that game at all. Unlike all the other characters who have plot armor, but it's for the sake of they're in the original game, which is later in, the future of the overall story than timeline, okay? They have plot armor for that reason. With Mary Sue, it's just for the sake of, well, we can't kill off our only female fucking Mary Sue character. We can kill off all these other female characters, but she's the Mary Sue, so obviously we can't kill her. We can't even have the big bad of the game, who's a raving psychopath. We can't even have him kill her. She has to survive. It's pathetic. It really is. And it is especially pathetic from a studio that is widely considered one of the best in the industry in multiple capacities, not microtransactions and, consumer practices. But in terms of actual content, it's considered one of the absolute best. And yet, here we are with a completely mediocre game. I'm sorry, I've said it in the past, and I took a lot of flack for it, but with all the baggage that comes with this game, it is a mediocre game from Rockstar, on the whole. And that includes the multiplayer. People can try to separate the two. I'm sorry, I'm taking the whole package for the whole game, okay? Red Dead Redemption 2 is a mediocre game, and Rockstar is currently going the route of fucking BioWare. They're going the route of having to include woke content for the sake of appeasing people on the outside and possibly internally. And because of that, the quality of their games are getting worse. The problem is that we don't really have many examples because of the success of GTA 5. But I'm telling you that unless they realize the problems that occurred in this game, and nothing shows that they've learned anything, they're going to continue to make these mistakes and continue to abide by the shift in the Overton window for what is acceptable to put in their games. Because of that, we may just see a future where Rockstar is just joining the hordes, joining all the other studios that are including all this garbage into their games and making their games worse. The problem with gamers is that they're going to buy it anyways. I mean, that's the black pill for everybody, is that regardless of how bad the games are, people are still going to drink that shit up like a dying man in a desert, drinking salt water. They don't care. It doesn't faze them. They're going to do it anyways because they're so ravenous for some reason. And I've made this analogy before, and I stand by it, and this is an older one, of starving dogs in an alley fighting over a bone. It really is pathetic to watch, and I've just kind of taken the black pill and have just stepped away and just said, okay, fuck this. I don't really know if we can salvage this whole deal anymore. And it is because the developers at these studios, they're just silent. Some of them realize what's going wrong and what's going on, and they just stick their heads in the sand and keep their mouths shut. They don't say anything. They don't do anything. Externally, internally, there are leaks. I've had people come to me, and Jeremy from the Quartering, he's had people come to him, but none of these people are willing to stick their heads up and risk just saying what's going on. They obviously fear repercussions and retaliation for just their opinions, but what can I say? I don't work at these studios. I'm just a layman. If people within aren't willing to discuss what's going wrong in the industry, then I guess things are just going to continue to degrade until everything is just bad oatmeal. I don't really know how many more metaphors and analogies I need to do, but, you know, that's the comparison I made it. Just bad oatmeal. To me, that's not good enough. But for whatever reason, for most gamers, that is. However, I will leave it there. But before I go, I will summarize once again that my suggestion to Krogan is, outside of talking more about Mary Sue, talking more about instances like what happened in Lemoyne, especially with the suffragettes and that sort of thing, regardless of what you could explore more in that kind of content, and you could feel free to do so, look up the women's suffrage in the South. Just look that up and compare it to what is put in the game. They argue for equality in the game. That is absolutely not what they believed at the time. It is the total and complete opposite. So that is the greatest example that I can give to you, because you've talked about revisionist history in other videos. That's the big one I can hand to you to take on and put in your next video, should you choose to do it. But outside of that, the big thing that I would advocate that you should talk about is overall the shift in the Overton window of what is acceptable to actually include in fictional content today, and that being the obvious factor for what's going on, because it is not just Rockstar, man. It is goddamn near every studio in the entire industry, and that includes everything in the West, United States, UK, and France or whatever, but also Eastern Europe, because I know from a first-hand source, someone who worked for CD Projekt Red, there is at least one SJW working in HR in CD Projekt Red. And if she, by the way, I know it's a she, if she's responsible for hiring people, guess who she's going to fucking hire? More SJWs to infiltrate that studio. But the problem is that the information wasn't given to me about who she was. I just know who she is at that studio. And so, the issue is that if we're not willing to handle this situation, even the best and brightest, even the most reputed studios of all, they will eventually be infiltrated. They will eventually be subverted, and every studio will simply be Bioware as of today. All of them. What it requires is more analysis from someone like American Krogan, but more importantly, people from within the industry actually talking about this, actually sticking their heads up, actually discussing what's going on, rather than denying all of it, putting their head in the sand and just waiting for the next paycheck because, I got kids, man, as though that's an excuse for any of this. We all got families. We all got jobs and employment. We all got skin in the game and things to lose. But the fact is that some of us aren't so cowardly that we're not willing to, at a minimum, discuss this anonymously online. Even these people won't do that. They have to come to me. They have to go to Jeremy from the Quartering. They have to go to sources that they can leak information to, just as like the best that they can offer from their own perspective. Like, that's the only thing that they can manage. I'm sorry, that's not good enough. That's not going to change anything about this industry. You as a developer have to stick your head up. You have to announce yourself as having a problem with the direction of the industry, with the direction of these franchises and games. You have to do it. Because once you actually address the fact that this is a problem, it then cannot be ignored anymore. So long as it's just me and Krogan and others, we can be dismissed as right-wing hacks and cranks and anti-SJWs and cringe lords and all that. We can just be dismissed outright as conspiracy theorists. But when it's coming from the horse's mouth, then it can't be ignored anymore. And until such a time, things will only continue to degrade. And I guarantee that as a fact. That is, so long as this is just as it is now, everything is just going to continue to disintegrate. Everything is just going to continue to get worse and worse until it's all mediocre oatmeal for all of us to suck down with as much woke bullshit in it as possible. But I'll leave it there. Thanks for listening.